That was a fake meeting. We met 5 minutes ago upstairs. That was for show. Okay.
The
Just want
illusion
to be
is
absolutely
ruined.
clear on the thing.
Well, it is a pleasure to be with you today, Greg.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure along our esteemed, as we said upstairs, lineup of far right. But anyway, so
I just signed a book that Steve Bannon signed. How's your day going? Yeah.
On a similar note, so I want to start off with your love of radio and what got you into radio on a different note. So you described yourself as a radio nerd. What was it about radio that appealed to you from the off?
I didn't really know why I loved it, but I just remember loving it very much as a kid. And I would just sit and obsess over various shows. And then I think when I worked out that it was a job, it was a breakthrough and thought, well, that's the thing that people do. And they, instead of, going to an office or being a teacher like my mum and dad were, Chris Evans' job was to go and do fun stuff. And I think that was when I thought, there's something about this that I like, and I think it was the idea that it's an enormous club which feels very intimate, because radio is completely different to TV in that you are broadcasting to one person in their routine, in their life. So you're being invited into a kitchen or a car or someone's bedroom, and that's sort of a privilege, really, is that they're choosing to spend their alone time with your show or your voice, essentially. So I quite liked that, and I loved thinking that this was just for me and I was part of this gang, and it didn't ever feel my favourite shows were ones that didn't feel exclusive, and it felt like I was allowed to be part of it. So I guess in that roundabout way, I really thought it was pretty magical that this thing was just sort of floating around the airwaves and you could tune into it. It still blows my mind a little bit.
And is that kind of framed how you try and do your shows? Is it, especially compared to Nick Grimshaw's, your show has a more feel of being intimate and calm and for the listener at the heart. Has that always been what you wanted to try and achieve?
Yeah, I think I've been roundabout trying to do it since I started on Radio 1, but it wasn't until probably the last 3 or 4 years that I met my now producer, one of my producers, Chris Sawyer, who really understood what my brain was trying to do with all the stuff. And we did so all the ideas that you probably hear on The Breakfast Show now are various iterations of what I've been doing maybe for 10 years or so. We did things like sofa surfing, where I'd go and stay overnight with various listeners on the way to Tea in the Park Festival and stuff. So we were very much in with the listeners, not just doing a show to them. And I think now I've just managed to spend enough time at Radio 1 to sort of refine those ideas and be like, well, how can we actually make someone's day a bit better or make them laugh in the morning? So that's kind of the jumping off point for all the bits. But yeah, I think I love radio so much that I think I understand it more than I ever have done. And I'm still getting better at it, which is quite exciting as well.
So as radio kind of struggles to keep up with television, as listener rates are kind of varying, but largely looking so they decrease, how does that make you feel, or what do you think?
I don't think it does, actually. I think radio is actually, it fluctuates a bit, but I think radio, if you include podcasts in that, which is essentially radio, people are spending more time than ever with audio and storytelling and bits of fun, audio bits of fun. I do a sports podcast. I do a Tailenders cricket podcast as well, and you can find your little tribe of listeners with all those sorts of things. So I think with everything, everything's a bit more fragmented, and you have to work harder to get people's attention with stuff. But I think in terms of what there is on offer for radio and podcasts, it's never really been better. And TV, like linear TV, is the one that's really struggling, unless you've got a big behemoth like Strictly X Factor's sort of dead, isn't it? So in terms of the ratings, it's hard. It's really hard to do, and it's nothing about the people who work on that show, because they're all very talented. But you've got to be really smart to get an audience in whatever you're doing. I mean, Netflix is on top now, and it's like everyone's like, oh my God, have you seen Fire Festival? Or like Netflix, oh my God, have you seen Sex Education or whatever? But we weren't saying that 2 years ago, so we might not be saying that in 2 more years. So you've just got to keep being smart with the whole thing and never feel like you're done. I think that's how we feel on The Breakfast Show. Like we're really happy with the first 6 months, but what about the next 6 months? You've got to keep being good every day, really.
So does it, in your mind, when you're planning for the next 6 months, you seem to be continuously topping, especially the big stunts that you do, like the Gregathon. Do
Yeah.
you start reaching a point where you don't know how you're going to top the thing to the next thing?
Well, you do get that fear sometimes, but eventually you relax, and as long as you can't ever create something when you're being stressed or when you're panicking about creating the next thing. So the best thing to do is keep calm and just trust yourself and and the team around me as well to come up with things. And the world is so connected. That makes it quite a lot easier to do big things like this, because things like the escape room that we did this week, which is where I was locked in a room. If anyone didn't know, I was locked in a room and I had no idea about it, and I had to try and, using the listeners, try and find the code to break out of this room. And it really took off because of social media, and we could tell that story on the radio in a linear form. There were Snapchat updates, there were Instagram stories, it was all on Twitter. You could pick a medium basically and follow this story. So it's a very rich world to do stuff. And also, because there's a lot of awful things in the world, there's a lot to pick on. There's a lot of, either you can pick on idiots and, do your funny take on idiots, or you can use the fact that people are quite sad about a lot of things and be a ray of light in their day. So it's actually quite easy. It's much easier to make people laugh now, I think, than
What's
it
the
was
next
5 years ago.
big thing that you've got in the brain on the horizon?
What are we going to do? We'll do something big in the summer. I don't know what that will be yet. We actually don't know. It's best not to. We're all absolutely on our knees after this Monday and Tuesday, because my team have been working on that for about 3 months. So they need to just. The next week or 2 weeks on the Breakfast Show will be light. Okay. So that, if you're getting into the show this week, it's not an accurate representation of it. It will be more music, less chat. It won't, of course. It'll be amazing. But yeah.
Then just going back to Gregathon, what was it like doing something?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say one more thing about that. Is that we tend to do big events just to keep the noise going. Because as I was saying about making sure that you get people's attention with things, I think you have to do things that burst out of that normal Radio 1 bubble. And when we did things like the hide and seek thing with Grimmy last summer, or as they mentioned, the Sport Relief challenges, those sorts of things burst out of the bubble every now and then, just to remind people that you're there every day doing this sort of stuff. So it's very important to do those. So on the one hand, they are creatively really ambitious and we love doing them. But there's an element to them, I suppose, that is a bit cynical, might be the wrong word, but they are deliberate attempts of making sure that people know what we're all about. And why wouldn't you want to shout about a thing that you're very proud of? I think that's basically it. That's our equivalent of Coca-Cola advertising Coca-Cola every single day, because they have to, and they have to advertise, and they're Coca-Cola. So I think you have to keep reminding people that you're there and doing good stuff.
Then how do you see, especially like the Sport Relief Challenge, as a platform for you to get across messages that you want to talk about, whether it be mental health or refugee crisis? How important is it for you to use the station that you have?
We had a really big breakthrough, I think, with the Sport Relief Challenge around young people's mental health last year. Oh my God, pretty much a year ago, this next month, with the Beast from the East. I was reluctant to do another one because I get a bit funny about the whole, it's someone in the public eye doing something wacky. Does he actually care about the stuff? And it was interesting that we were allowed to pick mental health, and we said, well, let's see how it goes, and whatever the story is the story. And it was a big challenge, and we thought, well, I know that it can be entertaining radio in terms of it being fun to listen to, and we didn't really know how the stories would come across in terms of the mental health awareness. But again, we just sort of trusted our instincts to be like, well, we think that the listeners are ready to go with us on it and speak openly about their issues or their friends' issues or whatever. And it was really the most magnificent thing I've ever been part of. I think it changed everything for me in terms of what I realised what radio can do to someone's day, but on an even bigger scale than what I talked about when I first sat down with you. I didn't just make me laugh or feel part of a gang. It was actually like you were confiding with a friend, and that's another level up, weirdly, and no other medium can really do that. Radio does it amazingly well because it is like your pal, and all the people I grew up listening to, I thought I knew them really, really well, And you kind of do. Like, you know about the ins and the outs of their life a little bit, and you feel comfortable enough to take their recommendations on music or a TV show or a film or whatever, but also you feel to get to a point where you feel comfortable enough to tell a radio station that you've been struggling with depression or you have suicidal thoughts or something, I think is sort of extraordinary, really. So it really it loosened up Radio 1 a little bit, and then the other DJs got involved with it and were talking about their experiences, and they were encouraging listeners to do the same. So we had this ridiculous moment where people were just confiding in a radio station their things, and it was quite overwhelming for all of us working on it, but it seemed to really connect with people. And it became less about the idiot cycling up mountains, whatever, and more about a discussion about why don't we talk more about our brains, and why in my training, why was I focused on are my legs strong enough, and it should have been is my brain strong enough type of thing. And it was an interesting case study, I think, and it sort of changed Radio 1 a little bit, I think, and also got it right up to speed with what young people in general are talking about and how open people are getting, which is great.
What were one or two most moving moments from that whole process?
I guess the messages that we still get from people saying that it helped them talk to their best friend or their mum, or they realised why their dad was sad, and that made me remember what it was like when I was a kid, because my dad still suffers with depression, and when I was 15 or 16, I didn't know what that was. And actually, maybe I was 18, because I went up to university, and I didn't really know what was wrong. I just thought, oh, Dad retired. My dad was ill. He had to retire. He was a headmaster, and he retired early due to ill health, and that really hit him hard. And I didn't really understand it. I was like, why is Dad sad? He's like, he's free. He's retired. he can go for walks and go to the pub all day. But it was, and I hope that it made people listening to the shows think, oh, okay, well maybe it's not just someone's being quiet because they're miserable, they're they hate me or something. It might be because there's a deeper problem there. So that's one side of it. And I guess actually going out and seeing the listeners on the route was a really magical thing, because I was cycling through villages and towns of the people that were listening to the thing. They're like, and it was just kids on the side of the road being like, "Go on, Greg!" And it was sort of, it felt like a Richard Curtis film, for people like running out with £10 notes and stuff, and Hugh Grant at the top of the hill with a pint type of thing. But it was really nice. Yeah. So
you said you think that this kind of thing helped bring Radio 1 to its younger audience and to get it back in touch. Do you think that you struggle with Radio 1 Extra to kind of be that station that's supposed to be for everyone, but also in touch with younger listeners as well? And does it help to have a station that's doing that alongside you?
Yeah, but both stations coexist beautifully, I think, and they do serve different audiences, but there's a lot of overlap in those audiences, and that can only be a good thing. I think that's kind of the BBC at its best, really, when you've got three stations. We've got the Asian Network on the same floor as us as well, and we all know each other, and we probably should do even more together. I mean, Dottie, who hosts the One Extra Breakfast show, is on my show pretty much every week, and there's no reason why I shouldn't be on her show as well, and we should all share. A lot of songs actually start their life on One Extra, and then they gather a bit of momentum and they come across to Radio 1, and I think they do cater in the main to very different audiences, and yeah, One Extra is a slightly younger demographic as well, and yeah, I think they work really well together.
Then just jumping back to your time at university when you first got into radio, how would you advise anyone here who wanted to get into radio? What would you say to them about getting on the first ladder or getting your first toe in the water? Well,
I did hospital radio, so it was just, it's not because I was desperate to do hospital radio, but that was because it was around. And so I guess student radio, I know it's Oxide, isn't it, here? So student radio is a brilliant thing to do because you learn how to put a show together and you join the music team, and then you work out whether you... I mean, I was station manager of my student radio station, and I hated it. And actually that made me realise that I never wanted to be a manager, ever, because I can't do admin very well. I can do ideas and fun stuff, but I couldn't sort of come up with a schedule or tell people off for smoking weed in the studios and stuff. And I was like, I don't know, I don't care. But oh no, don't. I'm trying to plan my show. I don't care. So there's lots of different roles that you can do with that, and you are suddenly the grown-ups, and you can create relationships with the music industry as well. I mean, Grimmy, for example, he became a record plugger based on the contacts he made at his university student radio station, and then went on to sort of run music venues and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of things you can learn from just being in that industry and make lots of mistakes. If I was doing it now, if I was 18 now trying to do radio, I would 100% be doing a podcast or thinking about an idea for a podcast, because I think it's the easiest thing to do in terms of it's a microphone. If you have a microphone and a killer idea, it could go wild, and suddenly you've got, like Alice Levine's podcast, My Dad Wrote a Porno, was recorded in their kitchen. And it was only supposed to be a few episodes of them just sitting around laughing about a real book, which Alice, I remember, brought it into the office and showed me some extracts of it, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. And we were just laughing about it, and then it turned into this thing. So if there's a nugget of an idea, I guess you should explore it in whatever way. Just put a camera over it, talk to some friends about it, workshop the idea. That's how we come up with all our ideas on the breakfast show. It's not one person going, I have an amazing idea to get in an escape room. So someone was like, escape room would be fun. And then someone else says, okay, where do we do it? Do we do it like the escape rooms that you can do on a stag do? Do we do it as a listener? Where do we do it? Do we build a set? Do we have all of those sorts of things? And then it snowballs into lunacy that happened this week, where I nearly lost all of my marbles. Yeah. But it was all documented, which was really nice. You could chart the demise of my own mental health. I went, I have to go up some more mountains for this.
So if you didn't get into radio, what do you think you would be doing now?
That is a good question. Writing, or trying to be an actor, or maybe trying to be there was a time when I was thinking about maybe doing stand-up, and I did it at university quite a bit, and I didn't really like it very much. And that might be because at 18 you don't really have anything to say that's new or fresh, really, because it's all about your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or, oh, my mum's so embarrassing, she gave me a whop before university, that sort of thing. And it's like, so I never felt like that was the best outlet for my creativity. But I still do, I want to write, I want to keep writing things. I mean, I love writing Kid Normal, and that's been I've always really enjoyed writing and creating characters and dialogue and that sort of thing. So I guess that sort of world, I think. I would have been probably very bitter about the person that eventually got the breakfast show in 2019. Be like, it could have been me! Yeah.
And then finally, before
or a teacher, maybe.
Teacher of
yeah,
what?
Because, well, I don't know, maybe a drama teacher. I don't know. No, I was a really big, well, English probably, or I was quite good at history, so I quite enjoyed that. But that wouldn't have been my number one dream. I feel like I feel very, very fortunate to be doing this job now.
And then my final question before we hand over to the audience is, looking in the future, do you think you might get properly into stand-up, or you might move further into writing?
No, I don't. I really didn't enjoy it very much. And there's an intimacy that you have on the radio which I will never want to not do. I never want to stop being on the radio. And I like presenting things on a stage, and I like hosting stuff, and I like sort of being the ringleader of things. But standing up and doing an hour and a half of jokes doesn't really give me the buzz that I thought it might do at one point. So it would definitely be on the radio somewhere. I think there's nothing really like it. You can affect someone's day just by playing a very funny little short clip, and suddenly they're in their car laughing. I think that's quite a powerful thing. I mean, it's not a world-changing thing, but it can change your day, which is quite a good thing.
How does writing compare to that?
Very, very different, but we still get the same amount of pleasure from seeing young kids clasping their copies of Kid Normal and asking endless questions about. So Mary, why is she? Why does she wear yellow? Like, well, because I wrote it. But there's something amazing about the mind of a 8 or 9-year-old, which I probably relate to, because when I'm feeling most, when I'm feeling calm and my most creative, you are fearless in your ideas. And there was not one moment in that escape room thing. It's a really amazing feeling that I try and hold on to as much as possible, where I was like, we can deliver this. I don't know how it's going to end, but I feel so excited about delivering this unknown, frightening thing that I'm not daunted by it, and I feel like we can play around with the radio station, and that's quite fun to have that. And it's not a power thing, it's just a sort of respect of the radio station, being like, what can we do? How can we push this radio station or this medium even further? So with the writing, having kids come up and be properly into the world that you've created is really nice. It's a very different feeling, but it's really good to see that kids still read books. I mean, not these boring things, but it's really. Oh, brilliant! The Dublin Review from January 1925. Cool. So, but it's really great to get, and maybe one day they will graduate to this. But it's good to get kids reading and see that they actually do like physical books as well, because that's something that people also wrote off a few years ago. People wrote off radio and was like, it's a dead medium, it's done. But it's absolutely not. It's the quickest, most reactive. It's there on the scene of a huge news event. It's the first thing, because it's someone on a phone. That's radio. There's no TV, there's no camera there really. We're doing a live, different, maybe FaceTime video and stuff. But radio is quick, and it's very, very reactive. We were on air and Prince died, and then the next link, you're talking about it. You don't have to interrupt the programs and put a news flash on or whatever. It's there, and it's evolving the whole time, which is very, very exciting. I've completely forgotten your question.
Well, I think that's a good point. It's a good time to move over.
But anyway, what was your question?
About writing, I think. Writing.
Yeah. I don't know.
You did good. You did good.
Cobble the answer together.
So if you want to put your hand up and answer a question, when the microphone comes to you, please do stand up. Let's go to the hand.
Hi. Thanks for coming when presumably you're quite hungover after the Brits last night.
I would like to say that I am probably just tired.
That's what I tell my chief.
Yeah. Can you tell? Is it because I look like a bullfrog with my big sagging eyes?
You look great, it's fine.
Thanks.
My question's about music. I was wondering how much of the set list during your show do you get to choose, and how much of it is determined for you?
Well, The Breakfast Show is mainly the Radio 1 playlist, and it's supposed to be a showcase of I suppose that it's supposed to appeal to the widest audience, so we tend to play the most popular songs around, but I do get a lot of choice. I get to do my tune of the week. That can be pretty much anything that's I think is going to be interesting to the audience, or an artist that might be big in 6 months to a year's time. So people like Sam Fender or Grace Carter or Lizzo or people like that who we know are excellent but might not be known that widely yet. So it's a really great platform to do that. And I also get some free plays just to chat about songs that I might have heard. It's weirdly relaxed to a certain extent, in that if there's a reason to play something, and it's not just me going, here's my favourite song in the world, and it's totally irrelevant to the listeners, then we can play it. So it tends to be more about stories and a reason to play something. But then again, if a new band came up and just thrust me a CD, and we listened to it and we're like, hang on a minute, this is amazing. What's the story here? So for example, the Grace Carter song, which we're playing at the moment, called Heal Me, we made into a drum and bass remix because I sound like a reprobate. Drunkenly, we were at a gig of Grace Carter's, and there's a DJ called René Levice, a very talented drum and bass DJ, and we were watching it together, and I went, René, I think this could do with a drum and bass remix. And this really cool sort of Canadian DJ was like, "Okay, Greg, yeah, cool, give it a go," and he did it, and it was amazing, and so brilliant that the record label have now made that into the official remix because they would think it was so good. So there's stories like that which you can champion, and Radio 1 lets you be free to do those sorts of things. Yeah.
And then let's go the hand 2 rows back if we can.
Hi, thanks very much for coming. Just want to know, once you've done the breakfast show in the morning, what does the rest of your day look like?
Crying on a train to Oxford. Questioning my diary planning. That's a very good question, and I tend to try and get out of there by about midday because we plan throughout the day just on a WhatsApp group, or I call the producers all day and we just talk about the things. And I'm also at my lowest ebb at 10 a.m. Sort of you've essentially given a performance, and I just sit there, just like I'm done. And sometimes I actually say I'm done before the show finishes. I think it's always very important to be honest with the listeners, always. And if you make a mistake, just say you messed it up. And then it will be a variety of things. There could be an interview for the next week. A movie star could come in, or whoever. Or we record certain features and run those through. So Dottie actually comes in and does the Fact Controller feature. That is pre-recorded because she's on the One Extra Breakfast show at the same time. So we record that after the show sometimes. And there's always planning meetings or whatever. But then when we're writing Kid Normal, I will go and sit with Chris Smith in a cafe or a pub around the corner, and we'll sit and have lunch and write the books. I have the Tailenders podcast, which sort of pops up as well. And I try and have a life as well. I try to. If I can be home by 2 or 3, then I've done it. It's been a good one. So, yeah, there's lots of things that keep me busy. I've just got a new dog, which I think I've just ruined my life. So, yeah. And all my clothes. But it's worth it. Hey, rescue animals, guys, is the best thing to do. What is it? Adopt, don't shop. #. Does that answer your question, sort of? Yeah, good. But also, I'd like to go. One of the things I'm trying to get back into the routine of is going to more gigs and going to comedy shows, because I'm in bed and try and be asleep by 9:30 because I'm trying to be good for the first few months of the breakfast show. It's been a sadness that I haven't been able to watch as much live music as possible, but that will change when I'm getting to the rhythm of it slowly but surely. Yeah, using a nice tinted moisturiser so I don't look like a corpse. It started off as Bella's, and then it worked. And I was like, oh yeah, I don't look as dead as I feel. And she went, well, you can't use mine. So I just bought my own. And that is an Oxford Union exclusive.
Well, then let's jump across the aisle to the hand there.
Hello, hi.
Hello.
I was wondering what your personal taste in music is and what you listen to away from the radio. If you get bored of all the pop music or...
Yeah. I love pop music, and I hate any form of snobbery about a song unless it's... I'll come back to that. But I love bands and guitars and singer-songwriters. So that's, I guess, when I was at university, that formed my musical preferences, and I just fell in love with bands like The Strokes or Kings of Leon and Maximo Park. I don't know if you remember them. One of my favourite bands from the Northeast as well. So people like that, and then anyone who's sort of doing that thing now. So people like Sam Fender, I think, is really exciting because he is a genuine singer-songwriter that's not manufactured anyway. I think he's the real deal. So people like that, but I do love pop music. I love cheesy pop songs, and I think there's definitely a place in the world for all those sorts of all that music. And I think if I hated pop music and I was doing the breakfast show, I think that would be a really stupid thing. It would have been a bad decision by the BBC if I was a music snob. But yeah, I mean, I like the War on Drugs, those sorts of bands. Foals. I've never been more excited about a band coming back. I think they are one of the few young bands who can be festival headliners now, but they'll be festival headliners for the next sort of 10 years or so. So bands like that, and I try and shout about them as much as possible without sounding like the old indie kid with my indie hair. But some amazing photos of my indie hair online. which I was thinking of bringing it back, but no, I won't for now. But yeah, that sort of thing, I'd say.
Well then, yeah, let's come across the aisle and go to the hand, you sir.
Obviously the Brits last night, 1975, One Big, bands like that.
Yeah.
What do you think of the state of music at the moment and bands like that and what they're doing for the music industry? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think people like Matty Healy are having a good influence?
Yeah, I think so, because he's sort of interesting, Matty Healy. And I know they're divisive, but any really successful band that crosses over like that are divisive. I think any band that play instruments and write songs together as a 4 or a 5 should be encouraged, and it's good. It's just good for kids or people growing up to see people with instruments actually making music like that. I like that band. I think they're really. It's sort of extraordinary that they have done so well in the climate of pop. But I guess they are a pop band that have crossed over when they play live and stuff. So they're a kind of an anomaly, I think. But it's great to have a big British band that are doing stuff like that. Yeah, the state of music is an interesting one because I think people are like, oh, music's a bit shit, but there's always been shit music. That's how the world goes round. There has to be terrible stuff for people to love the good stuff, and I think you have to have that. I think probably Radio 1 has been guilty and is guilty sometimes of being too obsessed with maybe views on YouTube and that sort of data, and not just trusting its instincts and its ears and stuff a bit more, which is something that I talk to the music team about a little bit, which is you can just go, oh, they've got 1 billion views on YouTube, but it doesn't mean that you should play BTS every half an hour, because it might be unpalatable for a lot of people. And I think you can be led. I think a thing can appear bigger than it actually is, in terms of what people like to listen to. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I've given you a good answer there. Hopefully, some interesting nuggets.
I feel like you pretty much summed up the same music by that.
Yeah, I think, but it's the same with everything. It's the same with influencers as well. Which, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that it's a real bugbear of mine. People that are, and there are some amazing people doing great things on YouTube and on Instagram and using their following for good and not just personal gain. But there are some awful people who just sell stuff to their followers, and they're getting away with it, and they shouldn't get away with it. They shouldn't be allowed to do Big Mac adverts that are that pretend that they're not adverts. And you can't. That's terrible. That's not creative. It's cynical and it's greedy, and it's sad because kids will grow up thinking, oh, I'm going to be an influencer, and you're suddenly selling diet coffee on Instagram. And like, well, they paid me $2,000 for that. I'm like, oh, well done, brilliant. So what? I mean, that's your legacy. Okay, well, if you're happy with your legacy, then fine. But I think but that's not help. It's not helping anyone. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to be altruistic and help everyone the whole time. But I think when you've got a platform and you've got a voice, you should use it with caution, and think about, how can you actually make the world a bit better and not make it worse by just flogging bad clothes.
Let's take another question.
It never ceases to amaze me how much people love cash, is what I'm saying. It's extraordinary. You see some people on Instagram, you're like, you love money so much. And I find that quite sad anyway, but yes.
We'll jump across the aisle to the hand over there.
Hi. So you said it feels like a bit of a performance. So have you got to the stage where it feels like, oh, this is my job, or do you still feel kind of nerves, like the pressure of the listeners every day, like watching what you're doing?
More than ever, really. I think with The Breakfast Show, it definitely reignited the passion in my belly to try new things and keep pushing myself. I think I feel challenged by this job, and I find it hard at times, and I have to really work at it, and we run things through and we practice things, and I should be getting better every day, really. I think that can be a danger of getting a job like that, is that you can start believing that you're amazing, and you're like, well, I'm on the breakfast show now, I've got nothing to learn. And the minute you stop learning is the minute you're dead, really. You have to keep listening to people around you, and you have to keep getting better. And I feel like I am getting better, which is great. I never thought that that's... I guess it comes from being an old man now, but you realise that you're never done, and that's quite an exciting thing. It's not... You should never feel like you can just sit back and go, well, I'm done now, I'm on the breakfast show, come and listen to me, I'm brilliant. Because, as I said earlier, you have to keep evolving and listening and learning, and also adapting to the world. And we weren't talking about these gender issues or race issues or mental health issues or the sort of division in politics as much as we are now. We weren't talking about this in 2014, and Radio 1 was very different to it is now. Brexit wasn't even a thing. I remember those amazing days. So you have to adapt to the world a little bit, and you have to have your eyes open, and that's why I try and read as much as possible. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on really one particular thing, maybe apart from cricket and radio and maybe The Simpsons, and probably the work of Steve Coogan, but and Michael Palin. I'm an expert on Michael Palin, but aside from those things, I'm not an expert on anything. But I have to keep across all the bits, so I should listen to Radio 3 and work out what they do, and I should listen to the shipping forecast. I should, I need to be connected to the world. So I don't know what I'm talking about now. I'm just rambling like a mad person.
Well, let's jump to another question. Can you come to the...
I'm going to have your water, Dan.
Do steal it. Go.
Leaving you with 2 sparkling bottles, which no one wants.
No one wants.
Hi.
Hi.
People in Oxford love the cheese floor, and they love old music and ABBA and Cher and Earth, Wind and Fire.
Yeah.
Why don't Radio 1 play that music?
It's a really really good question. I think there was a time, or maybe it still is a bit the same, where Radio 1 is embarrassed by things that happened more than 10 years ago. And what's roughly your age? 18, 19. You don't just know about the music that came along in your life. I mean, I don't. I know I grew up listening to The Police or Eric Clapton or Joan Armatrading because my mum and dad listened to it, or Dire Straits or whatever. So I think it's a really, really good question. When I played Africa by Toto, which you all know, obviously, because it's an iconic song, when I played it on The Breakfast Show, it went mad. People were just like, I can't believe it, this is amazing, what an amazing song. Because it is an amazing song, and I think there are definitely moments where I think we are softening that a little bit, but in a very traditional BBC way of, well, 15 to 24-year-olds don't know about anything apart from Justin Bieber. And I'm trying my very best to go, no, people aren't stupid, and also no 2 15-year-olds are the same. And and the other thing is that it's sort of our job to educate people that this is where this music came from, or the reason why Arctic Monkeys are so good is because the Beatles were so good, and all of those sorts of things. So it's a very good question, and I will be putting that to the Director General of the BBC, Tony Hall. Yeah. If he had his way, it would just be opera the whole time on Radio 1.
I was just wondering, when you switch to The Breakfast Show, obviously you've got a new audience, new expectations, a new team. You've got Roisin instead of Chris on the news. How did that change the dynamic of the show, and how did you react to that?
If you didn't hear, it was a question about how the dynamic changed on the new show and the approach of sort of getting that together. I wanted to start... It needed to be pretty much brand new, the only thing being me, that's the same person. But it needed to have different personnel. I had one producer that I brought across, and then a new one, and a couple of other assistant producers. And it needed new ideas and new thought. And really, when I went on air that first day, and I still do it actually to a certain extent, I do a show expecting that it's the first time someone's heard me, and then you never assume too much. There are some in-jokes and stuff, but they're normally explained and you can pick them up. It's It's not rocket science. But Ainsley Harriott is not rocket science. But yeah, I think that was the approach, is that this will be the first time anyone's ever heard of me or ever heard my show. So that was the starting point. That was the blank piece of paper. And I think when you start there, you then build the show up over time. So we didn't want to bring too many of the old features across deliberately. Chris had been on Newsbeat for a long time anyway, and that was the right time for him to step down from the afternoons, and we just wanted to go with a whole new team really, and see what that new input would do. And so far, it's I'm very, very proud of it. Really, really proud of it actually.
Yeah, let's jump to the hand there.
Hi.
Hello.
So, what is your favourite thing about Chris Smith, and why is it that you guys click so well?
Well, he's an incredibly smart man, and he's just one of the funniest people that I've ever met and definitely worked with. He is, he's got a very funny mind. We have a very similar sense of humour, but we bounce off each other very well, and that we just quite like making each other laugh. And we know sometimes you have that connection with a friend where you can just do a look and they start laughing, or if someone awful walks in the room and you just go ugh, and they know exactly what you're thinking. So that was, and actually winding the clock back, I don't know, 15, 20 years, I used to listen to him when he was on the XFM breakfast show, when he was Christian O'Connell's newsman and sidekick, and I just thought he was hilarious. And then one day, purely by chance, I was on the early breakfast show on Radio 1, and he was the temporary newsreader at 4:30, and he just buzzed down on the talkback and went, "Hello, it's Chris Smith with your 4:30 news." And I pressed the button and went, the Chris Smith? And he went, "A Chris Smith." And I went, "Oh, it is you." And then I sort of ran upstairs to be like, "I love you, you're amazing." Because we'd never met before. And then suddenly he was just on my show. And then we started doing the podcast together, which was so much fun. And I do miss that very much, but there was just no world in which that could exist at the moment. But we will do something else together at some point. And we love sitting and writing those books together. And he's a much better writer than I am in terms of coming up with plot and arcs. He's got one of those minds that can sort all that stuff out, whereas I like to do dialogue and jokes and character. So that's why we work well together writing books. But I think Chris will go on and write books on his own and become an enormous author. In fact, he's just done a sort of a reimagining of an Alice in Wonderland tale, which I think comes out soon. So he's sort of doing that, which is what he should do, because he's just an extraordinarily talented man. And we want to make it into, I think this might be another Oxford Union exclusive Oxford Union. We are in talks with a company to make it into a TV show, Kid Normal, which would be really fun. No more details than that at the minute. It's just ideas flying around, but we want to, and we will want to write bits of that together. So that's definitely an ambition for it, because we write it very visually, if that makes sense, and we like to imagine. It's very cinematic in some of its set pieces. So we always thought that it might work well as a live action thing. So yeah, so those are a few of the best things about Chris Smith.
Let's jump to another question.
He likes cats more than dogs, though, which is slightly wary of people like that. Any others? We've run dry. No?
I was just going to ask whether you had a favourite show in your career, or a particular moment that really stood out for you.
Yes, there's been a few. I would say one of the ones that really cemented for us as a team and the management of Radio 1 that the breakfast show was a force for good, but not twee and sort of lame, was the show we did before Christmas we did a show for young carers in actually just down the road in Didcot, and we put on this show for a load of young carers, but did it in a very I hope it wasn't a sort of lame. Come on, guys, let's help the young carers. They're so deserving. We hope that it came across as a sort of a very community-based thing where we were just pulling in favours from all over the country. Like a bloke would drive a Christmas tree down from Lincoln or wherever it was, and people would give us snacks or like DJ equipment or whatever. So we sort of crowdsourced this whole thing. And then we did that show on the day before we broke up for Christmas, the 21st of December. And it felt like a really nice celebration of what we'd done on the show so far. So I think that was a show where we all sat back and went, okay, feels like this hasn't really been done in this way on Radio 1 before, and we were very, very proud of it. So probably that. And Nick Knowles turned up, so.
Any other questions?
He was invited, by the way. He wasn't, he just walked past.
Hi. How does it feel to like discover new artists and kind of make them more like well known? Like with Adele with like Hometown Glory, do you feel a bit smug, or do you feel just kind of like happy to have brought that to everyone?
I think you can I think some certain DJs can overdo their own importance in breaking an artist, but it's great to introduce people to new stuff. Certainly, Adele was always going to be massive, and Adele. But you're referring to, and that's great knowledge, that was my first ever record of the week on the Early Breakfast Show. And it's still one of my favourite songs, probably because it's very special in terms of I was 21 and panicking about everything, and that song sort of settled me. It's just nice to introduce people to new stuff, whether it's their new, I think I said it earlier, but it was their new favourite band or their new favourite thing. That's what radio's so good at, is that it is there when you're in your life creating memories, and you do associate certain songs with certain times, and I definitely associate certain songs and presenters with certain times in my life. So it feels very special to be that for other people, I guess. But yeah, Adele would have been fine without me, I think, to answer your question. But yeah, it's great. People I keep going on about Sam Fender. It sounds like I'm obsessed with him. I sort of am a bit, but he's someone who is on the cusp of about to be really, really massive, and it's exciting to. It's a relief for me that I still care about that, actually, because I didn't know what I'd be like at 33. But I feel younger and better at life than ever, and I guess you think at 33 you might be irrelevant, but weirdly I feel in the best possible position to do this breakfast show now, because I guess I've been 20 and I've done my 20s and I've made horrible mistakes and done all those things, so I sort of know what it's like to do all that stuff, and I still care about new music. I think that was the big shift with this breakfast show, is that it's not really particularly for any age group. We kind of target it around about 20-year-olds, or what we think a 20-year-old might find funny. But that's a massive guess. But hopefully you pick up kids who are younger, but it doesn't alienate people who are 30 or 40 or 50 who really like pop culture. And that's fine to like pop culture and, like hearing the latest stuff.
My dad loves your show, and then I love your show.
Great.
So
No, that's good. I think that's what a pop music station should truly be about, and it shouldn't. And there are other stations that sugarcoat this weird make-believe pop world, whereas I think Radio 1 sometimes is really good at cutting through all that and just being like, well, that's fun. That person's an idiot. This pop star's really embarrassing. Or this is funny. Or this. And I think that's you shouldn't hold pop music in too high esteem. And I think certain radio stations do. Capital. I think it's like it's not real. No one talks like that. That's not what humans are like. But Radio 1 is very good at talking like humans, and I think people relate to that, definitely.
No shade.
Have you got another question?
There's some amazing talented presenters on Capital, but they just don't let them talk. They just don't. I don't know why. It's annoying. It's annoying because there's some great presenters that don't ever get a chance.
We'll jump to the hand in the back, and then we'll come.
I feel we have to mention tailenders at some point.
Really?
So. Have you got anything special planned for the World Cup?
We have actually, yeah. I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it, but
Okay,
I'm going to. I mean, it's hardly an earth-shattering press release, but we are going to do some live radio shows during the World Cup, and we will do some more tailenders, and we're going to do a couple more live tailenders shows. This is a podcast, by the way, that I do with Jimmy Anderson, England's greatest ever bowler, and Felix White, formerly of the Maccabees, one of my favourite bands because I'm an indie kid. And we do this cricket podcast, which kind of came out of, well, nowhere really. 5 Live said that they had some slots to do. They said do 6 podcasts, and we did it, and it was really fun, and it just found this audience. So we now do that, and it's loosely based on cricket, but not really about cricket. And it's, yeah, I don't want to say it's exploded. That would be a bit over the top, but it's I don't know, enlarged. What am I talking about? But yes, so tailenders, we're going to do some more of that in the summer, because obviously the Ashes and the World Cup, it would be very stupid not to do something. So I'm excited to do the first sort of live shows with Felix and Jimmy on 5 Live, which will be great.
And then I think we've got time for, we'll take the 2 questions, we'll take these 2.
My question is very simple, and I'm wondering, how do you prepare your voice before the breakfast show?
That's interesting. I usually have a Marmite bagel. And so lubricate the old larynx. I don't really do much preparation. Maybe I should do some gargling or some scales, perhaps. Use a tuning fork, something, I don't know. I don't really do much. I have a little stretch, but nothing much. And today I'm maybe an octave lower than I usually am. Not so much. I make sure that I'm well hydrated, and I make sure that I've eaten something before the show, because I get very low on energy if by about 7:30 I just sit there and just question everything about my life. So, and you can't be sad on a breakfast show because you've got millions of people who are more annoyed than you are about being up. Because I'm doing a really fun job, and lots of people have to do quite annoying commutes or whatever, so you can never be the guy that's like, oh, tired today, because that is the stupidest thing you can possibly say on a breakfast show. In fact, we have an alarm that we sound if a pop star says, if I say, how are you? They go, oh, I'm tired. No, you're not allowed to say that. Get out. Come back in. You've checked your privilege. Oh no, the millionaire's tired. So hard being a millionaire pop star. That's another thing. It's not hard being a pop star. So don't let them ever tell you that it is. Okay, it's not hard. It's bad if you're not very good. That's what people get confused with, and they think the struggle is why it's hard, but it's just because they're not very good. So I don't do much preparation for in terms of the voice. But we do a meeting at 5:30 around a very trendy standing table, and we all sit there firing off creative ideas and work out how to put Ainsley Harriott into every feature. So we have a meeting at 5:30, which I get in for, and then we essentially come up with the show in about half an hour in that morning, because we bring all the stuff that's happened overnight, and I feel like it's fresh snow. We just go, this is amazing, what can we do? No one's touched any of this, and we can just do something brilliant with it, hopefully. So yeah, that's the prep.
And then the final question, Justin.
Yeah, I feel like my question's more of a downer, but
Oh no! Aren't you too old to be doing this? Who are you?
I don't actually watch your show, but
it's fine. It's the radio, you listen to it, so it's fine.
Yeah, so I was wondering, as you said like a few minutes ago, how no 2 15-year-olds are the same, and taking that in the context of your show providing an outlet for like mental health and stuff, I was wondering if you ever kind of end up feeling quite powerless in your position to offer like personal advice through the radio, or do you think that like, because obviously it is doing an amazing thing, but at the same time,
Well, I think you're right. We don't dig deep with every issue and zoom into absolutely everything. I think it was one of the great things about that Sport Relief thing was that it just, in general, when you've got a big station like Radio 1 saying it's okay to talk about these things with your mum or your sister or whatever, that's quite a powerful thing. You can't possibly go around and individually tend to every single person. But in a way, but you sort of can, because radio is a companion, or a podcast is a companion, and it is like a little, sometimes, I definitely feel it now with certain podcasts and shows, that they are my little sanctum, where you can just escape and just get lost in a great story or a great discussion about a thing, or just a fun show. So in a way, it sort of does, in a roundabout way, it is your pal when you are feeling, radio's sort of there when you're feeling very happy or when you're feeling very sad. It's a constant thing that you can dip into. And that's, I think, where it can help. That's what I try and promote, I guess, on my show, which is, I don't expect people to love radio as much as I do, because that would be bonkers and completely unrealistic. But if they liked it 1% as much as I do, and realise that it can be a good addition to their day, the listeners, then I think that's the win. That's my aim, really.
That's a nice place to end on. So unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. But ladies and gentlemen, please do join me in thanking Greg James.